Everyone thinks this look is Byzantine, but Rome was already dressing like this centuries earlier. In fact, there was no moment Rome became Byzantine. Cultural and fashion changes happened slowly, and it started much earlier than you think. Trousers were already in widespread use in the army at the turn of the 1st to the 2nd century. First as shorts, as can be seen on Trajan's column for example, and finally their long counterparts were already used by the Rhine and Danube legions as early as the second half of the 2nd century. Emperor Caracalla then made them fashionable empire-wide in the early 3rd century. Tunics with long sleeves were already used by Alexander the Great and Augustus himself. During the second half of the 3rd century, decorative elements like orbiculi and clavi stripes were becoming more complex and ornate, something we associate wrongly with much later centuries. On the other hand, elements we often think vanished earlier persisted much longer, such as the famous caligae soldier sandals, which we still see in iconography well into early medieval time. Also, the iconic flaps of classical Greek and Roman armor called pteriges persisted in officers' armors into high medieval times and even made a stylistic comeback in some European armor of the Renaissance. They were likely made from a sturdy, woven linen with very iconic horizontal stripes in red or blue. We don't know how these armors were exactly made, but we propose an educated hypothesis here with a felt and linen base layer topped by leather in between the base and the metal armor. Now I don't wear the metal armor here as in our previous early 3rd century video, as Romans wouldn't wear metal armor while on sentinel duty inside garrisons and cities. The long spada was also already in use since Rome's first clashes with Celtic tribes in Republican times. Often associated falsely with the barbarization of the army in late antiquity, these swords became the norm in the infantry already during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, and have been the norm in the cavalry for centuries. They could be carried around the hip or over the shoulder. Evidence exists for both. There was, however, a significant shift in helmet design during the later half of the 3rd century. Gradually, the army abandoned the more complex to produce earlier types, which were largely based on Gallic designs, and introduced bipartite, rich helmets inspired by Persian design, which were faster and easier to produce at industrial scale. This change of look is striking for many, but the Romans simply did what they often did. Took up and perfected an already existing design. The shape of military cloaks seems to also have changed by this time. More and more often soldiers would be portrayed using the Greek oval cloak called chlamys rather than the square sagum. With the onset of late antiquity, military dress codes and even regulations became quite rigid and almost amounted to a sort of uniform, albeit with changing details and decoration. You probably came to associate this look with notions of Byzantineness, barbarization, decline of Romanness and loss of greatness, but you have been misled. This look is still the product of classical antiquity, just not the Rome of modern pop culture. What you call Byzantine isn't a break. It is Rome evolving.